2022 meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. We will call the meeting to order and begin with a roll call.
Yes, Mayor Drapkin.
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley.
Here.
Commissioner Gormley is excused this evening. Commissioner Christensen.
Here.
And Commissioner Tate.
Here. Thank you. We have a consent agenda with 4 items. Does any member of the commission wish to have any item pulled off of the consent agenda? No. Not hearing any, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tate and a second by Chair Tankersley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. Have all commissioners had an opportunity to review the accounts payable and purchasing reports? And are there any questions?
No, thank you.
No question.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'd now like to do new employee introductions. I would like to welcome up Jason Brown and Garrett Bristow. Is it Bristow correct pronunciation? And of course, John Spence to do the introductions.
Yes.
We'll have you introduce yourselves and we'll introduce ourselves as well. Do you want to
Perfect.
take
Yes,
the
I
lead?
can start. I'd like to introduce our 2 new meter readers. To the left is Jason Brown. He started on September 20th, and I will go ahead and let you say a little bit about yourself.
All right, my name's Jason and grew up and went to school in Yamhill, Carlton, and lived in McMinnville since I think 1999. Got a wife and 2 young daughters, 5 and 7. Last 5.5 years or so, I spent as a letter carrier in Hillsborough for the post office, and was working crazy hours, 6 days a week, not having much time with the family. Then I heard of an opening here and was happy it was in town and opportunity to spend more time with the family. So yeah, I applied and
Great.
was
Excellent.
lucky enough to join the team.
Great.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Garrett, and I've grown up in McMinnville, been here my whole life. I went to Oregon State University, and I got a job at a construction company doing project management stuff. And then I decided I wanted to look into something else because of commuting, long hours. And so saw this opportunity and decided to apply, and here I am.
Great.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome.
And he started just 8 days after Jason, so we got two newbies right around the same time. So
Great.
Great.
Excellent. Commissioner Tate, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Kathy Tate. I'm a longtime resident here in Yamhill County and used to run local internet company, but I'm retired and been on the council for, I think this is my 2nd year. And yeah, it's really exciting to have local people join and stay in the community, a great place to work. So glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Christensen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. As mentioned, I'm Jody Christensen. I am a special projects manager for the city of McMinnville, and I've been on the commission since I think January 2019. It feels like 1,000 years, but welcome to the team. This is a great company, and they've got wonderful people here. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Tankersley.
Hi, I'm Tom Tankersley. I've been on the commission for quite a while. And I'm really glad to see you guys here. I mean, it's as you figured out already, I think it's a great place to work. And I've always been very impressed with our employees and with what they contribute to our community, not just to the job here, but to the whole community. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And my name is Remy Drapkin. I'm your mayor here in the city of McMinnville and therefore also an ex officio member of this commission. And I've been working with this commission since June, essentially, of this year, and look forward to seeing you around. I'm here every week.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
All right. Wonderful. Okay, we're now going to hear a report from our consultant, or regarding our consultant and partners report with Mason, Bruce, and Gerard.
Thank you, Mayor. The 2022 sales are wrapped up. We're still getting the final details of the numbers together, but we pretty well know where we're at. Powerline West came out pretty well spot on with the estimates of final volume and value. 436 loads were shipped to Murphy Company and some other destinations. Came in a little under 2 million board feet and about $1.25 million of income. Powerline East, 320 loads were shipped to Stella Jones and other destinations. That one cut out, and the value and volume on that are about 15% under the original estimates. Last month, I had reported that was going to track kind of right on what it looked like we were going to get, but I didn't anticipate where they were at in the sale. I think we were like about a week behind getting load reports in, and then I hadn't been out there right before the letter was written. And I'm always kind of anticipating where they're at in terms of their pace of things, but they were closer to the end than I anticipated. So I did dig into, and it's not uncommon to miss the estimates by a certain amount, but I did dig into the load reports. They match the page volume, the load. We have a camera out there tracking loads leaving the landing, just as one extra check. That matched the load reports. We did in high intensity crews, went back, even looked at, was that compiled correct? That was. Utilization out there was good. There's a normal amount of slash left over. That was also one wild card with poles is, you're sending in 100-foot logs. Well, you don't want them scaled that way. They need to be split scaled, so nothing's scaled at a longer length than 40 feet. Shorter the log, the better the scale. That was, if I drilled into the actual scale tickets, that was all set up and done right. Actually, we got better scale that way because sometimes you end up with shorter logs than you would if they're saw logs. But I think the big wild card or sensitivity to the crews and the estimate was the area of the units. We had 6 units along that power line. 4 of them were real small. The 2 that we cruised were like 17 acres and 11 acres. And they were, kind of passed the laugh test when I saw the volumes, but it was just, they're real sensitive to little swings in volumes in terms of the variance. So I think if you look like the confidence interval, 70 out of 100 times, you'll be within plus or minus 10%. So this is one of those 30 times that we're just a little bit outside it. And even within the one unit, the volume was, the timber type was variable. So one end of it was smaller, one was bigger trees. So that creates a little bit of variance, and just a little bit of variance on a few things in small units, and then you can be off that amount. So that explains where we missed the mark on that one. So, if there was any questions on that, but I just wanted, you generally were within 4 or 5%. You can see on Powerline West, it's a 50-acre unit, and then we're spot on there. Whereas Powerline East is 34 acres, made up of 6 units. The 2 crews were smaller, so that explains the variance there. So, if there's any questions about that at all?
Well, Brent, I'm happy you did the deep dive in. I was going to ask about that, but and the stumps are consistent with everything else you looked at too, right?
Right. Stump heights, all those kind of things to check off in terms of, because I have had times when pulp is shipped or small logs are shipped and paid by the ton, and the accountant thinks it's pulp and it's logs, and we check all that kind of stuff. So
But this was all logs, right? It was,
yeah, I think it's just the size of the units. Yeah, we've had cases where, like a couple of years ago, there was an 8-acre unit that was like 90 or 100,000 the acre. And I went back to the cruise stuff. It was all right. I did the cruise. I knew everything, but it just seemed a little out there. So I just backed the number off a bunch, and it came out closer rather than this one didn't seem as high. So I just left it with the cruise. Didn't quite cut out. So.
Just to make sure I understand, when you say the individual units, you mean each tree was a little bit smaller than you assume. So the yield, the metric board feet ended up being smaller than was estimated, and that's why the overall income is lower than was estimated. Is because when you say individual units, you mean each tree?
I mean each sale unit. So like there was 6 units for the sale. So they're just individual pieces of timberland out there. So one like there were like 4 of them that were like 2 acres each, and then one was 11 acres and one was 17 acres. And the smaller those, so we put in about 3 plots per acre, sample plots across the stands, and then across each unit. So like for that 11-acre unit, you'll have like 40 plots. And so that's a real intense cruise, but the smaller units can just have a greater variance than like the 50-acre unit. Powerline West was probably 200 plots in it, representing that one area. So you get to a point where all the variability is taken out of it, whereas these small units can you're not taking as much variability out of the estimate.
So Brent, the plots are, you don't look at every tree.
Mhm.
The plots are a random or a formalized sample.
Mhm.
And so you're sampling, and then if you have very few samples in a piece, it won't even out as well. Is that what you're saying?
More variability.
Mhm.
How many blades of grass are in the square?
So you see,
Yeah.
so you see like on Powerline West, 70 out of 100 times, the statistics would say you'd be plus or minus like 4 or 5% of this estimate I'm using. Whereas this one, 70 out of 100 times, you're like 8 or 10%. So it's, even though it's the same plot intensity, it's just more variability.
Is the company that did the Line East a company that we've worked with before, that you've worked with numerous
Mhm,
times to
mhm.
do that? I mean, I would think that would make some difference to your confidence levels of
Mhm.
past
Right.
performance, right? Versus somebody you had never had worked
Mhm.
with before.
Well, and Bill, we still have an independent scaling bureau, right?
Mhm.
So it's not the buyer doesn't measure the logs and determine the volume. It's an independent bureau that does it, right?
Right. And in terms of like load security and reconciling everybody's numbers, so you'll receive the payment from the buyer with their statement of what they're paying for. Then we get the independent scale data from the bureau. Then we get the load report from the logger, and then we've got that camera showing. That's kind of the final piece that, because there's still some few loopholes, but once you have that camera, then that kind of secures that we know we accounted for all the loads, and then we're out there too. And so yeah, it really just came down to that variability of the small sample size.
Great.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Christensen, any questions?
And then just 2 other quick things before I get into the annual review. The fire season ended October 21st, which is as late as I can remember, but actually ended a little later across the state, but here it ended the 21st. Reforestation, we're currently finishing up a regen surveys just to determine how this past year's planning, and actually some other even further back last few years planning to determine what interplanting will be necessary for the upcoming season. And then looking at 2023 stumpage sales, the one larger wood sale is something Herbert's going to be interested in again. I met with their log buyer today to look at that, and so we're
Yeah,
getting that
they're more interested in the larger dimension because of the
stuff with grade in it
especially.
and tight grain and clear lumber type stuff. So we're looking at the potential 2023 harvest areas. And then I'll just jump right into the annual report here. So I assume that hopefully everybody's had a chance to review it. I'm just going to kind of go through, hit the high points and just, of course, stop me any.
So Brent, are you gonna come back to the proposed sales or
It's in here.
in the discussion? Is now the time to ask a question about the proposed sales? Or are you gonna get to that later?
Anytime, but I mean, I'll get to it in the report.
Okay, I'll wait for you then.
Okay,
Thanks.
sure. So just going through the report here. I've got right at the front here on page 2. The rundown of forest management activities for the year. Reforestation, we planted about 80,000 trees. Some were initial plantings of brand new final harvest units, some interplanting. We stay on top of this with our fall regen surveys, so we make sure we're getting these stands stocked and on the regen surveys, we'll typically plant, then do a survey in the fall. If it's good, we'll survey it the next year. If it's good, then we won't survey it again and figure, well, we're pretty well, it's free and clear. But we don't stop surveying until we get 2 good surveys in a row, where we have like at least 300 trees an acre. So we got a real systematic, organized way of making sure we don't miss these plantations, particularly since we don't spray in the watershed. We just can't let it get away from. We don't want to drive out there in 5 years and have, we didn't see that there's no trees there. So we're on top of that. So you'll see kind of an even split of interplanting units that had been planted but still need trees, and then our new plantings. See the timber sale rundown here. Talked about that. We'll final numbers in next month. Silviculture this year, we slashed about 84 acres. And pre-commercial thin, 71. The slashing is just clearing brush to prevent competition with seedlings. That's a measure we do more of than typical timberland owners because we don't spray. So it's a lot of handwork to fight the competition with the seedlings. And the pre-commercial thinning is just reducing the trees per acre to.
Brent, as I remember, the industry goes back and forth about whether pre-commercial thinning makes sense or not financially. Does it make sense for us more because we have a longer rotation, or?
I think so. And I think a lot of smaller landowners and some industrial folks try to push it to a point where they can do an initial, like, first entry thin, and they don't have to do to have to, have that cost of the PCT, and then they can wait and then maybe it'll pay for itself at age maybe in the 30s or 40s.
But we don't do that. Right?
No, and the thing there, we'd end up would be impacting every piece of ground across the watershed. So I've always been a little leery of that. And then also our stands are like, that would work good here in one particular piece, but then because of this interplanting and we don't spray, so we're fighting the brush, and then some of the stands can really become uneven aged.
Okay.
And so it's like, well, that corner, that would work good to do a thin now, but these trees are too young.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we're in more of a mode of like the pre-commercial thin, and then maybe age 40 or 50 at a commercial thin.
Yeah.
And then a final harvest at 70 or 80.
Okay,
So,
great.
and then did a lot of road maintenance this year, as always, replaced 10, 12 culverts, a lot of road grading, some rocking and shaping of roads. On page 3 here, keeping up with our ongoing inventory of stands. our northern spotted owl protocol hooting, just to ensure compliance with regulations there. That's becoming maybe less necessary over time as we have more fragmented timber, less older timber, but I think it's still good to do. Not a lot of extra projects this year, but there's some BLM items, a few Weyerhaeuser issues, and then the annual Moss Adams audit. And then just a quick look here on page 6, starting on page 6 at the historic log market. As I mentioned every year, the Water and Light is generally always receives higher bids and captures more value than your typical other public timber owners. Part of it's just a difference in philosophy, and we do have greater flexibility and better management efficiency. Similar timber to what other public timber owners have, but federal agencies are mostly thinning if they're doing anything at all. State agencies are more regulated in terms of final harvests and have different objectives. But I don't think either one of the state or the feds, I think, wouldn't pay for their program with timber. I think it's such high administrative costs, which we clearly do here. And throughout the years, Water and Light's maximize value of their timber with a higher quality log, tight grained, free of knots, good for poles, and which has a lot of benefits, especially like a down market. Even we're a lot less sensitive to changes there, even because of that that higher value log.
And when I was trying to derive this earlier, when you're talking about this difference in philosophy, I was trying to figure out what is the difference in philosophy that makes this yield more revenue? Is it because of the clear cutting? Also, you just mentioned admin costs, and I noticed in the report earlier that our admin costs are significantly lower. So what are the levers there that are making all of those? Or could you expand on the philosophy for me a little bit to help me better understand?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, clearly the federal government's faced with the litigation and a whole host of different issues that affect their program. And I don't know, that would be the biggest one as far as just they're obstructed from doing a lot of management.
But I think typically
even when they are operating, they're doing thinning, and they just have a whole lot higher overhead. They'll have 8 people out there for 3 years marking trees. And
But I think Remy's question is why does our timber sell for more? That not that we're netting more, but why does our timber sell for more?
the quality of our timber.
Oh, it's Boise Cascade Logbuyer told me once. I mean, if it wasn't worth anything, it'd be a $50 premium just because it's slower growing, tighter grained, extremely the strength of it is really exceptional. Like Frank, that does a lot of stress grading, would point that out. So it's just a higher quality log.
And it's an older tree too, right? We have a longer rotation than industry has, right?
Mm-hmm. So that would be, clearly we're head of industry there. But there's just not a lot of public timber, even at 60, 80 years old, it's for sale out there. Herbert's, they'll go clear up to Canada, and they're coming clear up here for us, so they're better than Southern Oregon. So I don't know if that answers the question or.
Yeah, yes, generally.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that I'm wrapping my mind around why we why we're able to demand a higher value. It's great.
Oh, okay,
and I just want to make sure that I understand what the difference is in the market so that it makes sense, as opposed to just we yield more money for the same for a product. I want to understand if it's a product difference or a process difference or what's driving that. And I think I'm hearing it's a number of things, and quality of the wood, the longer rotation, and then maybe just the overall way that the systems are run makes an impact.
Yeah, and I think we're really easy to work with. You look at our contract, which is very thorough and solid versus a federal contract. And I think it's a truly attractive arrangement we have with buyers. So.
Thank you.
So looking at current log markets, for small logs are generally in the $800 to $900 range, and $850 to $1,000 or better than $1,000 for the larger logs. And this is the same as last year. It's kind of gone up and down, but that's where we're at now. And I would just say, I've been saying this all year long to folks, in terms of the log market, that there's a lot of issues and concerns with economy and inflation and international issues and so on. But I think this Pacific Northwest log market should remain real solid for the foreseeable future, just because it's just supply and demand. We don't get the wood out of Canada like we used to. You know, the United States is a net importer of lumber, and we're just not getting as much. And so there's and then with this private forestry court, more regulations coming into Oregon next year, that's even less supply.
Is that going to have a major impact on us?
Not as much, because we don't manage for like net present value and like trying to get every last tree. We have enhanced buffers, enhanced screen up, so it kind of fits into our values a little more. But yeah, it'll have an effect in terms of your options, it's for sure. But so I think anyway, I think housing market, builder confidence have been declining. Now I guess it's steady, but I think again, the age and quality of our timbers, we're somewhat immune to some of these normal market conditions, especially like when we have a lot of good pole material. If we did have a down market, we can switch to that kind of thing. So we got about $900 this year average stumpage bid price, and I would conservatively estimate, $500 at the very least to $800 per thousand for this year's sales. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see 900 again. But it's hard to put that down as something to bet on. But especially when you talk to log buyers and they'll give you a price what they're paying, and then they'll come and bid on our sales stumpage value, the same number. It's like, so it can be tricky on these predictions, but we should see real good prices. And the poles, I think we want to keep that as an option going forward. We just haven't done that for like 7 years now, because our stumpage prices are so good. It just doesn't make sense to take the risk to do a log sale program. So I'm on page 8 here. We want to continue to work in this older timber type. I think I have changed this from 10 to 15 years to 5 to 10, Tom. So we're getting closer, but so just even talking to Herbert today, they're really interested, but there is, they're finding less out there. They're already having to switch their thinking, and even some of the timber frame home builders would probably have to accept a little less quality than they've had, as there's just less large logs available. So even though we do have opportunities to market that, we want to, I think, keep chipping away at that timber type, just so we get the value out of it before we lose the market. So within that larger type, we try to work with the stands that are declining the most, so we're keeping the healthiest of the older stands. And there are times even if that being said, where we have other constraints, like we like to let our clear cuts green up more before we harvest. And so like the last few years, we switched to some smaller timber. It's older, but smaller, just because things like that. And then we've been working with this fire mitigation goal as well. So that's driving things. But I'd estimate with 2 sales this next year, looking at conservative stumpage figures and volume figures, we get about a little over $3 million up for 4.25 million board feet. And we'd sell these as we have in February.
And Brent, that's a sustainable yield at 4.25 million feet, right?
Yeah, I think our average for the last 20 years that's in here is like that's right here. What do we for the last 20 years we're like 4.3,
Okay.
and our sustainable our annual growth is 4.75. So we're well within it. And there was a few years ago, I think we didn't even cut 4 million. So we try to make sure we're extra sustainable. I mean, MBG's, there's since 1965, we've never cut the same stand twice, and we still have 1,500 acres left. So that's one easy measure of the rotation. We're going to get to 70, 80 years without ever cutting over the same ground twice.
So can I ask, when you have an area that you say is in decline, is that because it's reaching an age where there's like so it's like 70, I hear you say like 70, 80 years, is that sort of optimum, or is it different based on where the trees are?
So the biological rotation age or point where decline might be 100, 150. The Weyerhaeuser's cutting at 40 because the economics say cut at 40 because their money would make more in the bank than the tree is growing. We're not concerned with that as much. So we're more like 70 or 80. But the trees are still putting on volume at that point. These stands that are actually declining are like 100, 150 year old, like from the Stucco burn vintage, so.
And what does it mean when a stand is declining? Like, what's your definition of the declining stand?
So that can, I guess, depend, like for Weyerhaeuser, it's declining in value. It's not growing as much as the money would. That'd be economic rotation. Is a biological rotation age is just a point where it's not putting on any volume. And the trees are dying, the crowns are receding. We've got a lot of areas where they're just we call fading. The crowns are losing needles and just kind of getting choked out. And we run around and try to get a lot of that salvage and have, preserve these stands a long time. So, but that'd be a general way I'd look at it. I think when the tree, and then one like maybe technical definition is when the annual growth becomes less than, or like the incremental growth per year is now less than the average. So that when the annual growth, the mean annual growth over time might be like this, but when that periodic yearly growth goes below the overall average, then you're declining. So that makes sense. On page 11 here, you can see annual harvest volume graph and annual harvest revenue pretty much track together there. The more we cut, the more money there is. There might be times when you cut a little, even though you cut more, it's worth less just because of the market or the type of timber. Then you can see on page 12 that that's the breakdown of our net acres by age class. And you can see we still have 1,500 acres older than 65 years. So extra sustainable forest. Page 14, there's a first look there at individual alternatives and alternatives to cumulative volume and income. This is a table we've always had in here. It's kind of showing if you only did salvage, if we had no market or didn't want to do a program. And if we did one of the final harvest, 2 of the final harvest, the full program. And then description of the sales on pages 15 and 16. You get the one large wood sale, the 303 road sale is one of these stands in decline. That'd be the rationale for cutting that one. Large wood timber sale number 2 is the final main project along the power lines there. And again, we try to keep, maybe we should just cut all the power line timber this year. But this is something we always have to deal with, is we don't want our units too big. We don't want to overcut. We don't need to be out, we're not revenue driven. So it can be a challenge. Like, where do you cut this off? How do you spread out your cut? So we'll be back in there this year getting the final stuff along the power line.
Is the board feet is less in that 50-acre parcel because the power lines are running through that?
It's younger type. So the large,
Oh, I see.
I'd call them both large wood, but the 303 road is more like that 150-year-old, and the 187 road is more like 80 years old, which for us is like, that's a young type, small type. But so that's that volume difference.
So Brent, on the 187 road that's next to the line, will that be a shorter rotation now, like this up, we're gonna do this, so it'll be on our plan, and we'll cut that more often, so it won't get to the position where it could follow the line.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that will create, as I look at the photo on the aerial photo, that's going to create a slightly larger area of harvest and next to something just harvested than we normally do, right? But we need to do that because of the danger of the fire.
So yeah, we try to, I always think, I was saying that today again. I'm not sure what commissioner said that one time, but we don't want any moonscapes out here. Was that you?
That'd be me.
So I always think, like, we don't want sale next to sale, even if it's legal, we try to move, and that's why we have this enhanced screen up. Like, we don't really want to cut here, and once we cut, we don't want to cut next to that again for 10 or 15 years. This is just a case where we're kind of fire mitigation
That
driven.
makes sense. And then on the same photo, the 303 road sale, I can't tell from looking at the photo, how old is the patch that's been harvested next to that? How long ago was that?
So the one,
Looks like to the northeast, right?
yeah, it was harvested in 14.
So that's been,
So those trees are up there
8 years.
10 feet, and the ones just
Okay.
to the west they're like 15 feet tall,
how tall?
like 15 feet.
Oh, okay. So that's clearly growing well, and filtering water that goes through it. Okay, great.
And along and now we're on page 19 here for reference, but you got that 187 road. Well, there's still, you think, well, what about that other, there's still trees along the line. Well, to the west, that's the Haskins Creek buffer. So that's just is what it is. We're not going to be in there. And then to the east there, we might go along the line and get the critical hazard trees, but we can't cut anymore, because then we will be up against the state rules for clear cut size. Because you need 300. If that fire line was 300 feet wide, then it wouldn't matter. But it's basically, that's all will be considered one contiguous area, and you can't have an opening larger than 120 acres. So, which we wouldn't want anyway. But that's why that you wouldn't.
We're not getting them all now because of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And Brent, please explain the reason why you didn't, on the 187 road with that in mind, why you didn't squash it out, so you just cut along the edge of the power line. That wasn't a very good description, but why is it?
Just trying to, because I was already at 50 acres, and just trying to make sense of the way the timber type went there. Now, that might be, that'd be a good option to just make that kind of an artificial line across there. It would make the sale, another 10 acres. The way I originally drew it out, like, okay, well, this is the obvious way to do it. It was like 80 acres. I'm like, oh, well, we just don't typically do units that big. This is something we've dealt with for years of trying to.
No, I
Sometimes
support that. But my question is, if this leaves trees that create a fire hazard is there a good forestry reason not to have another long skinny sail?
No, no, and I think that's what I was saying. I think we will get any hazard trees along that, like trees that could reach the lines. They wouldn't, all the timber there wouldn't, but we can, at a minimum, we'll get that. And we could make it into just a strip there too.
Would that make it much less attractive to a buyer, or would it make it harder to manage the forest later?
I don't know about I don't think the management would be. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay,
It
so
would just that it would get bigger. It'd be,
so I mean, you still have 45 or 50 acres, but it would looks like it might catch almost all of the trees
mhm,
along the power line there, right?
mhm.
Can you do that?
Yeah, the way it is now, it's coming down a draw, and it was like a natural, like, okay, I'm gonna
Right.
go down there. So we could just go grab that, which is kind of what we did with this other power line west unit.
Right.
There's a lot of artificial stuff going on there just to try to get that.
So when you say go grab it, you don't mean just expand it. You'd actually reduce some of the areas to the north, right? Or not?
I think we'd want to keep I think we would just add to it. We could just,
But then are you going to push up against was it 120 contiguous acres of clear cut? Right? If you don't reshape it as Tom's suggesting and take it off the north in order to stretch it out, then because it's up against your 2022 cuts, it's going to go over that limit? No?
we'd be at 98 now. The way it is now. So you've got 20 acres to work with there.
So you just put a little leg on it.
I think, yeah, I could look at doing that, or taking the trees that could hit the line. And then this would be on the block to cut as soon as this other stuff's screened up here in 4 or 5 years. So that'd be a real clean way to take it all, but.
So the other choice would be just to add to the sail
Mhm.
within whatever the distance is, the line, 50 feet or 20 feet or whatever it is that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think if you don't mind having a bigger unit because of it's kind of a special case with this fire goal here, then that would work just fine. That's how I originally had it laid out. And I mean, we got to make this smaller. We're getting.
Yeah, and so to go back again, it's going to be hard to harvest it if you take area off the north to compensate for the area you're adding to the.
I can make that the first. Try really hard to do that. Make that my first option there to try to just trade acres.
Okay. So how should, I mean, it
And I
doesn't be
think part of
grass, but
this
just-
boundary to the north is a road. And so
Okay.
that's where it gets would get kind of funky to start
Just have a little buffer around
just
that.
drawing, just heading down the hill away from that road, because I'm following a road there to the north. And then I get over towards the west and then come down a draw. It's like it was the cleanest way I could figure to not have the thing end up being 100 acres.
And how much buffer is left around the waterways? Is there any mandate for that, or is that just an internal decision or individual decision?
Well, that's, I think, the Forest Practice Act.
Yeah, it depends on the stream size.
Okay.
So it's 50 to 100, up to 50 to 100 feet. But that's going to change in 2024.
It's going to 300.
So Brent,
I think 150 on the big stuff.
I'm still not clear on what we'd be voting on tonight, or do you need just to vote tonight, or do you want to come back with something? What?
I can, why don't I try to, I think, well, my initial idea was just to make sure we get the hazard trees
Okay.
that are outside the unit.
Okay, so
And
the
then-
unit plus the hazard trees, and you just mark those trees, and that'd be part of the sale, and that
Yep,
would
they
take
just
care of
go
it.
get those like getting salvaged.
And they can get to those trees without without problems, right?
So it might be wise to maybe talk to BPA too
Mhm.
about that and make sure we get the ones that they think, because they have the data, they have the LiDAR data, so they know the fall
Mhm.
lengths of the trees that
You
come
can
into the
tell
line.
too. Yeah, okay, so. You can get to it,
Uh-huh.
they can get those out,
Mhm.
okay.
And then we would come back, make that its own unit here in like 5 years,
Okay,
and then it'd be,
that makes sense to me,
Yeah.
rather than try to redo the whole thing, okay.
yeah, BPA is tickled. Drive out there now, and there's nothing around their lines now, in this here to the east. And we got rid of all these little islands. And
Yeah, I know it was an issue, and we actually, I think they actually sent us the LiDAR data, so I don't know.
yeah, you gave me that.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
And they're always out there beavering on stuff and dumping our trees and leaving them. It's like, why don't we just cut them and ship them? So, so the only thing I'd mention there is I think we've done a 1-2, we were doing this thing a 1-2 year sale.
Mhm.
Meaning Remy, usually we do forever, we did 2 sales and the contract expired the year we sold them. So we'd sell them in February, it expired end of December. But buyers really like 2 or 3 year contracts. It's more flexible. The states typically 2 or 3, like the BLM stuff that's in the watershed or working through the watershed. Those are all 3-year contracts. So we started going to 1-year sale and 1 2-year just for better flexibility. And they still can't operate in the winter. They have to follow our watershed rules, but I'm thinking we want to do this fire stuff right away and not fiddle around with it. So that makes it a 1-year thing. And then with these new rules coming in, it gets pretty confounding and confusing to do part of the sale, lay it out, the existing rules, do part of the sale,
Right,
the
and the
existing
next-
rules, and then here come the other rules and say, well, now we gotta. we're
So
in motion.
just do both 1-year sales this
Yeah,
time?
yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
So if it's a 2-year sale, does that mean they just have 2 seasons to get
Mhm.
get all of that stumpage out of there versus one, so they can work on it?
And then we always require half the money by July, and then in the case of 2-year sale, I think we require the other half by January, or
And
so we basically have all our money in a year.
Oh, we're just to be clear, this time we're just doing 1 year.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And just to be clear again, when we vote, the description of the 187 road sale would be the 48 acres plus all of the hazard trees.
Yep.
That go along the BPA power line, the southern boundary of that sale, right?
Yep. Mhm. And then we could, any other questions on the actual sales?
Nope.
Could go into the proposed budget and budget review here for the last 5 years. So on page 21, you can see pretty consistently and this is net income. So this is after when we're doing polls, after paying MBG. This is the 10-year total of the water and light for timber sale income net versus MBG's cost. So we're at a little under 10%. And this of course includes seedlings, contractors, and everything. So I'm pleased with that. We're under 10% overall. Page 22, you can see the last 5 years breakdowns of the budget. This year will come out, my projected total will come out lower than any year in the last 5 years.
So one question I had on there, Brent, was, do we need to do some more rock crushing?
Mhm.
So we need to make sure we have that in the plan too.
We are out of rock. So that's never been part of this plan,
Right.
but is that something I want me to bring that for the year, bring that up?
Yeah.
Work to get that going.
Yeah, we need to get that going. So we'll have rock for construction season.
Mhm. Yeah, because we generally do that. I think it'll be 5 years next year. So we pretty much like 1,000 yards a year average is what we
Yeah, I think we crushed 5,000 the last time we did it.
Mhm.
Are so that rock's coming in large format and it's literally being crushed?
No,
so
we
that-
actually blast, we have our own rock
Right.
pit and we
Rock pit.
blast and then they crush it on site.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And that's construction in town and you're
No, it's actually for construction in the watershed.
like road construction or?
Yeah, the graveling,
The roads.
they're all gravel roads up there, but graveling them.
So I think there's roughly in the watershed, we have about 60 miles of roads
Mhm.
that we maintain.
Okay.
And so every year, the loggers do some of the maintenance of the roads there.
Mhm.
And that's what the rock is essentially for.
And is the quarry in the watershed?
Yeah. Do you have where's that picture?
Well, our quarry's right here. Here.
Oh, yeah, I see.
So it's over on the McGuire
Okay.
side of the property. So you go out there through, it's
The
through
BLM.
BLM and then you're in our pit there.
How big is the quarry?
I don't know, it's probably 15 acres or something.
And it's cheaper for us to crush it and haul it to where we need it than it is to buy it to be hauled up here, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty long haul
Yeah.
to get it up there.
Okay.
Especially if we gear up for it, I will say, like the way that road, that AB road is such a disaster that. If you need one load, like by the treatment plant, just run down here and get it,
Right.
because it takes, the time you drive over there and back and beat your truck up. But when you really gear up to like, if you're gonna put a lift of rock down on 4 miles of road, then yeah, it's cheaper to
Okay, great.
do this. You can see on page 23, there's a graph of the forest management charges by category. The greatest charge is reforestation. Which shows out there, we've got great looking plantations and it is more expensive when you don't spray. And so that's been great to have the support to do all the reforestation work we do.
So I think one of the things that staff's also looking at, will probably bring back in next month is buying our own cooler. Since we rent every year.
Oh, for the beer truck.
Yeah. For the beer truck. That's why the beer truck's up there. No, it's having our own cooler so that, because every year we rent one and then we have to have Dave Ferrini come up and hook it up and have it take it apart. And so we're looking at that. It's just having that right there on site all the time.
Mhm. And that's really nice because we're a real small time program. It's a big deal to us, but compared to Hampton and Weyerhaeuser, but we're competing for contractors and so taking that part of the logistics out of it, and then we can get our seedlings and get them to the cooler, and then the contractors might come in and say they're going to be there a week and then they're there a day. Well, that's back when we don't have a cooler, we have to show up with trees, it can get to be make it difficult to get the job done. So be able to just get our trees there and then that takes that piece out of it is really nice. So on page 24, you can see we pull out reforestation, some of these charges that aren't MBG's core charges, and you can see a breakdown of just our charges there. So, and then a graph of that. So without reforestation, page 25, then our biggest expense is the timber sale administration. The light blue on the graph is what we call management planning task, and that'd be like contracting and timber cruising, keeping up with the inventory and everything leading up to the sales being sold, getting the prospectuses out, cruising the sales and so on. Pages 26, 27, you can see a breakdown MBG's work by employee and task, and within each category, what the specific tasks are and then the hours spent. And then page 28 here is the proposed budget for 2023, which is exactly the same as it's been for the last few years. It is an increase, but that's just to reforestation and tree farm maintenance, which are charges that are mostly passed through. Our administration costs will be the same next year for reforestation, but seedlings have gone through the roof. Planters are more. Seedlings just a few years ago, like in the 40 cents range per tree, and now they're over 60 cents a seedling. So it's a big deal when you see a tree sitting there that's just been planted. It's like, oh, it's over $1, per tree. So that's the two increases there. And so you can see by alternative what the budget would be. Alternative 3 being the full program. And then there's a graph of that, page 29. That also shows a breakdown of the reforestation. What's represented there with what is the greatest forest management charge of the budget. So that's what I have. Any other questions?
Not for me, and I'm understanding you don't need direction from the commission, or you do need direction regarding the timber sale and which direction to go.
Yeah, we would, at this point in the process, we'd ask the commission to consider and direct by a motion which alternative of harvest to go. I think we have an alternative 1, alternative 2, and 3, the 3 being the full sale. We've authorized the total budget amount, which is, I have it written down here, is 300 and
I haven't memorized it. The 327.50.
so $320,750. And then go ahead and direct general counsel to prepare the annual contract with Mason, Bruce and Jard, authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign that contract for 2023. The contract runs January. It's a calendar year contract. Yeah. So we'd also add, I can, with that, I can, if you want me to re-express the motion.
No, I think we understand.
Yeah, just, is there any, yeah.
I'm sorry. So there's 3 options here, or 4, I guess, and not doing anything.
Yeah, that is an option.
But I'm not clear. Did we talk about why we have multiple options and why we wouldn't why we would choose one of the other ones versus option 3?
I suppose if you want to reduce the cut, or, a lot of this goes back, frankly, to the way you'd like seeing it reported each year and broken down. So I've just kind of kept with it, but so it just gives you, it's kind of just something rather than all or nothing, just to have some,
So you've always presented multiple options, but your recommendation wouldn't be any different than option 3?
No, I think it's worked well. We're in a good market. It's sustainable. So.
Yes, sometimes we've gone to fewer. One year the log prices were so low, and we just said, we don't need the money. This is crazy, and we didn't sell. I don't think we sold salvage only. I think 1 year, just because
blowdown.
Yeah. So here, and I like to see what the choices are, but we almost always do the full thing, but sometimes we don't.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
That's a good question.
I think people say, well, how do you know? What does it mean to the down market? Well, I look at the 5 or 10 year average. So if I showed up and log prices are below the 10-year average, that'd be a time I would recommend we just hold off and maybe look at polls or just some salvage or maybe one sale or something. But we're got 50% over the 10-year average or something. It's been an incredible log market. Even through all the shutdowns and everything, we've been just singing right along with prices. So.
Okay. Commissioner Christensen, do you have any thoughts or questions? So we're looking for a motion to select option 3, the sell salvage of large wood, clear cut number 1, and large wood, clear cut number 2, to direct legal counsel to prepare contracts reflective of that, and for the 2023 year, 1-year contracts reflective of that, and authorizing the clerk and the mayor to sign those contracts. Is that correct?
I would so move with a couple of additions. One, that the council would also prepare a contract for Mason, Bruce and Gerard reflecting the budget that they presented for this option of timber management harvest. And second, to clarify that the option for which sale was it? The
Well, the 187 road.
187 road would not only include the area within the red line, but also include the hazard trees that are in the adjacent area with the Bonneville power line that forms the southern line of it.
Right, and that budget amount is $320,750. I think Trina, you got all that?
Wonderful.
So you got to report it.
You've got to record it. Yeah. That's what I'm bringing up.
So I have a motion by Chair Tankersley. Have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Tate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks a lot. But I just say, Mayor, try to get out to the next watershed tour.
Yes.
Get a feel for all this stuff.
Well, she's been on one,
I've
right?
been on,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, did you run the last one?
I was not on the last one. I already had a conflict that day when it was announced, but I have been on one, but I would love to come out again,
Oh.
especially with a refreshed perspective and so much more information. So
Yeah.
I'll take you up on that just about anytime now, actually, anytime after next week. I'm
Well, we do,
All
we
yours.
do those formal tours, but if anybody can come out anytime. Kim used to just call me like with a day's notice, I'm coming out. Okay. So
yes,
it'd be great. Anytime.
wonderful. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to taking you up on it.
All right.
You
Great.
could wait a while and bring your cross-country skis.
Snowshoes?
But I'll let everybody know if they're shooting the pit this year. That's the thing. I want
Yeah.
to miss,
That's always interesting.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rick.
Good job.
Thank you. We now have appearance requests. And we'll be starting with Haley A. Bell, attorney. Please join us.
I essentially wanted to come and just answer any questions that you all have regarding the written materials that I provided. Here on behalf of my client, Rich Oldham, and he is requesting outside water service. He is building an ADU to care for his family and needs water for that ADU. So, do you guys have any questions regarding what I presented?
Thank you. I have questions for our legal counsel, if you don't mind. Has this been done historically where monies have been repaid that were accepted in lieu of something else? And if so, and the mentioned interest rate, how would that be determined, et cetera?
Okay, well, I think I answered your question, not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware that we've done anything like this. And where we,
I don't remember what the,
No. and Commissioner Tankersley's been around longer than I have, but yeah, so I don't remember that proposal. So I guess to cut to the chase, maybe it seems like what the attorney, I forget her name, Ms. Bell Sherman's asking for on behalf of her client is a rescission of a contract that was executed 14 years ago and was fully performed, which is, I think just as a legal matter is probably not something that is going to, that doesn't really, I don't think there was a misunderstanding or a mistake or a fraud or something that will allow us to rescind that contract. Having said all this, all of that, we have, staff has talked about this internally quite a bit and just sort of looked at this, we kind of took a deep dive on it today. And I guess what I would suggest is maybe that Ms. Haley Bell, am I getting your name wrong?
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Okay, maybe you and your client maybe can return to staff again, because I think probably trying to reinvigorate the 2008 agreement is not probably an option that's available to us. It's been fully performed. And so if there's an availability of water there, it's probably under the original sort of 1985 easement. And whether that can be done is sort of the question. I know you raised that in the letter, but I think that's something that probably merits further discussion with our staff, kind of based on our current practices.
The 1986
86.
the easement, it does allow for other water through a cross connection only with the approval of MW&L. So we would have to amend that agreement.
Well, I think maybe I think it probably merits further discussion with staff, because I know what you're proposing relates to the 2008 agreement,
Mhm.
and I'm just thinking that's probably not a path that's going to get us anywhere. And that's in my opinion, because
Why wouldn't you be open to amending the 2008 agreement? If the 1986 one is going to have to be amended as
well,
well.
I'm not saying it's going to have to be amended. That's not what I'm not proposing. But I think it's just, I don't think this at this moment, I think we could probably get more done with you talking to staff than in front of the commission, is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
yeah, I would love to go that
Yeah.
route. I was told that we had to come here and.
Right, and I think that was, I think your proposition, the proposition to get the agreement or to rescind the 2008 document and repay the money.
Mhm.
I think that would have required action by the commission, but I think it probably would be, in my looking at it, it's probably something the commission, I wouldn't recommend the commission do it. I mean, I think it sets a precedent of just the commission selling water for money. And that's not what we want to be doing with private parties outside of the city. I mean, just to sort of cut to the chase.
So what I hear is there is potentially a pathway forward that can be reached
With
by
staff.
with staff and through legal
I
counsel.
think under our
but-
current, I think under our current practices, there may be a way for this to be done, but probably not the way you proposed it, is what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, I would love to discuss further with your office on how to proceed.
Sure.
And I, when I was looking at it, this property is not in the urban growth boundary, right? But it's
It is not.
in the urban reserve area. Is that where it is?
It's outside the,
Well, there's a UGB, and then there's a comprehensive planning for urban reserve areas too. That I know that doesn't make any difference in our policy, but it's sort of, would tell me that eventually the plan is we're going to serve this property eventually.
I'm not aware of
Yeah.
what.
Anyway,
Yeah,
take a look at that.
sure.
Yeah. Which doesn't change the rule and the resolution that controls this, but it sounds to me like Sam is saying there may be a possibility for you to find a way that you can go within the rules
Mhm.
under the original agreement.
Great.
Okay,
Well,
thank
we can
you.
discuss that.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you. And we're now going to staff reports, and we'll start with our purchasing manager, Chad Hudson.
Hi there.
Well, just kind of want to give a little update on supply chain issues. I know everybody's kind of aware of what's going on everywhere, but how it's kind of impacting us. Been writing some memos here of late, asking for potential purchases of vehicles that we may never ever get, and stuff like that. So that's kind of the stuff we're grappling with right now. We actually went out to Ford. It's been probably about 6 months ago. Plus, we placed an order for 2 chassis F550s. And we got confirmation of one build that they keep on moving the date around. The other one we probably will not get. And then, so we stay in constant communication with suppliers and vendors, kind of keep a pulse on what's going on, not just, dealerships, but also utility specific vendors. And they're telling us that they're going to be opening the order bank for F550s here soon. So we already sent specs over to them, and they basically said, we can place an order for you, but good luck at the end of the day. So those are just kind of some of the things we're up against. Transformers, we brought that to the commission some time ago. That problem hasn't gone away. It's only gotten worse. We see a bunch of utilities sending transformers in as we have in for repair. So some things we may have recycled in the past, we're sending in for repair. And it's not just us, like I said, they're flooded. So it's taking a lot longer to get those back. We've recently seen lead times on conductor,
In particular, underground.
kind of get a little bit scary. So I called Irby Electrical Distributors a couple days ago. The latest one we got before that phone conversation as far as lead time was about 8 months. His most recent update he had was basically 1 year, year to year and a half out. And so you start kind of forecasting what we have. We have good stock right now, but you start looking at projects and subdivisions coming in and trying to forecast out a year and a half plus. And so those are some of the things, staff, we've been doing, working close together, trying to stay in front of that planning. But I think more than anything, just kind of want to bring it to the commission, some of the things that we're seeing out there. Things that used to be on the shelf are no longer on the shelf. And it's really sporadic too. Sometimes we'll send it out one time, stock's good. And the next time we'll send it out and it'll be 6 month lead time. We're starting to see a lot more vendors no bid, no quote. Competition's really tough, especially in the public procurement where, this the 3 bid, and there's only about 3 to begin with that we can send them to. And so a lot of times we're starting to get just no bids because pricing and availability is so far out there that they're not going to quote.
Were those firm prices for that conductor or were they escalated?
No, and that's another thing. Nothing's firm anymore. They just can't with lead times out that far.
Yeah.
They're not giving you a firm price.
Maybe prices will go down.
Right. So I think it's just kind of for informational purposes only, just kind of update the commission what we're up against. Like I said, right now, stock wise, we're looking really good. But we don't see this slowing down either. That's the other thing. A couple of years ago, during the pandemic, everybody was kind of like 2022, 2023. We're here in 2024, 25. So it's gonna be something that we're gonna be facing for a little bit. Prices of everything have more than doubled, sometimes tripled. What is it? $750 and $1 million. So it's underground primary cable. I think we had a price about a year ago of $750 for the 1,000 or the million. Latest price we got the other day was $1,849 a foot. And so things are we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it at the grocery stores, but it's just, we just want to bring it forward to the commission, kind of let you all know what's going on. So.
Thank you very much.
Chad and his guys have done a great job keeping us supplied and we have not had any customer
Yeah, it's been amazing. So
issues.
forecasted this a long time ago, right?
Well, we really saw it in the pandemic and it's just kind of carried through.
Yeah.
And that's just he's just talking about the electrical. We're seeing the same thing on the water side as well. Valves, fittings,
Sinus brass.
everything.
Need to get some manufacturers here in.
Yeah,
Yes, we do.
absolutely.
That's pointing at Jody. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for
Thanks,
keeping us
Chad.
up to date.
And now, if we may hear from James Burke.
Good evening.
Hi there.
I'm back for zone 2 conversation. So last commission meeting, I given you an update on zone 2. We had just given Westfield Properties, the developer, the engineering construction cost estimate to review. And based on the review, they had a couple options. So they could, they had 2 options. They could accept it, which would mean we'd go out for solicitation of bid once we had our 100% design documents in place, or they could reject it, meaning that the project would be designed and we table the project. Based on their review, they did decide to reject it. The funding was, or the estimate was a bit higher than they expected, which as the design went along, we started seeing, as Chad's talked about, prices increasing, lead times getting extended out further. They did request as part of the rejection letter
that McMinnville Water and Light look into alternative funding options for them. Those options would be something that we've discussed in the past, such as reimbursement districts, SDCs, and those kind of funding mechanisms, which we don't currently have in place. We're using in extension agreements to get this moving forward. So at this point, we're kind of on hold for the Zone 2 pump station, but we are going to wrap up the design of it. It's pretty much the documents are there. I think the next week or two we'll have the design and all the bid forms ready to go. So we'll have it ready if they change our mind moving forward.
I think the engineer also did an estimate on cost escalations over the next couple of years too.
Yeah, so it's increased. I mean, this is last year, it went up 15.9%
For construction.
for construction costs. And then I think over the last 3 years, it was averaging around 9%. So wow, it's we felt it in our industry.
Yeah.
We're getting
Well, it's hard for them because it's also the other side of building, right? Building all the homes is way more expensive and
it is
harder to do as well.
Yeah, so I've been in communication with them. We'll continue to talk with them to try to work through it, but at this point, we kind of got to see how we move forward with that.
So if there was other, I mean, is there other developers that down the road would potentially
I'm sure
be in
there
a
are.
position to partner with them in some way? Or-
Potentially, yeah.
The city's working. I mean, they have a committee going forward.
Yeah,
for
Zone 2.
And I'm sure that'll start some more discussions in regards to that as we start moving forward.
Potentially, maybe the size of the area would get larger, so the cost could get spread over more units or more lots.
Well, I mean, obviously, housing for workforce development is so critical, but
Yeah.
all
I think
these
these,
pieces have to go together, right?
these houses are, I think typically are gonna be more expensive because development costs are so much higher up
Right.
there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, we do have a section of pipe in there that we're going to install internally for us. It's for Zone 2, but it's part of the design and construction piece that we'll wrap that up this spring. So that ties in, there's a segment of pipe right now that goes across the road and through the Larson property there that there's about a little over 100 feet of pipe we need to put in. So we'll put that in. It's behind the fence on the reservoir side, so it's on our property. We get that connected at least, so when we move forward in the future, that'll be there.
That was our future growth
That was
plan
our future growth plan.
anyway, right?
and we're still waiting for the 16-inch valve
We're still waiting for a 16-inch valve.
for that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of where we're at with the Zone 2. And in regards to the developer there. So
Thank you.
I do think at some point we're gonna have some discussions on funding and how we, for developers and so forth, they're gonna probably come forward. That's something. All right. You have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
Nope. Okay. All right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Very much. So let's see, we are going to go a little out of order here from our agenda. And we're gonna skip old business for right now. Continue down to item B in our new business, which is our public hearing. And so it is after 5 o'clock, the time the public hearing was announced on November 15th, 2022. Which was when the public hearing was scheduled to begin to consider the following standards from the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act, PURPA, number 20, demand response, and number 21, electric vehicle charging programs. Today, the commission will receive public comment and information, both written and oral. I'll, as mayor, act as presiding officer, conduct the hearing and post reasonable time limits on participants and receive documents and reports into the hearing record. At today's hearing, the commission expects to hear a staff report. During the staff report, I may recognize other members of the commission to ask questions of staff and the public. And after the staff report, interested parties will be invited to give comment on the purpose standards. Before making a comment, please state your name and address for the record. Tonight's meeting is being held in a hybrid format, both in person and digitally on Zoom. And now provide an overview of some important procedural items to ensure your comments are heard. Any interested party that has joined the public hearing in Zoom is automatically set to be on mute and to have their video display hidden. Do we have anybody on Zoom? Do I need to read the rest of these instructions for any reason?
I don't think so,
Wonderful.
no.
Do we have anybody on the phone or that has called in for the public hearing?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. After the staff report and any public comment, the commission anticipates continuing the hearing to June 20th, 2023 for additional comments by interested parties. A final staff report, deliberations of the commission and decisions relating to purpose standards is anticipated prior to November 15th, 2023. But yet no final decisions will be made today. Seems a little contradictory, doesn't it?
We have to get started.
I understand that our Power Resource Manager, Ms. Jamie Phillips, will begin with the report.
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this evening, here to discuss with you the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act, PURPA. Enacted in 1978, key purposes being to encourage investments in conservation, efficient use of facilities by electric utilities, and equitable rates to electric customers. Under PURPA, states and non-regulated electric utilities, of which McMinnville is a non-regulated utility, are required to consider implementation of certain standards, although there's no requirement that standards be adopted. The law has been amended several times, with standards being added over the years, the most recent being the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that added 2 new provisions relating to demand response and electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging programs. So IIJA requires utilities to commence consideration of these new standards no later than today, November 15th, 2022. And consideration must be concluded and a determination as to whether to adopt each standard made by November 15th, 2023. There's some relevant language included in the memo, as well as some detail regarding the 2 new standards. Demand response practices states that electric utilities shall promote the use of demand response and demand flexibility practices to reduce electricity consumption during high demand periods, and may establish rate mechanisms to recover the cost of promoting those programs. Standard 21 relates to electric vehicle charging programs. States shall consider measures to promote greater electrification of the transportation sector, including the establishment of rates that promote electric vehicle charging, improve the customer experience, accelerate investments in charging, and appropriately recover the marginal costs. I will clarify that this standard, the language says each state shall consider, whereas previous standards call out the electric utility to consider. However, the requirement for the utility is captured in section 111 on the previous page for non-regulated electric utilities to consider every standard in the following section. So there's a little inconsistent language there, but we have confirmed that, yes, we are indeed required. So over the next several months, the plan is that staff will work internally and also with our consultant, Utility Financial Solutions, during our cost of service analysis to evaluate the standards, consider the appropriateness of implementation and the level to which they can be implemented for water and light, and keeping in mind the purposes of PURPA and the implications and impacts to our utility and our customers, keeping in mind infrastructure needs, rate design, power supply costs, the operational impacts and cost impacts to our customers. That is the plan. We'll commence consideration and hope to return in June.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any interested parties in the gallery that would like to make a comment? Okay. And still nobody on Zoom, I'm assuming, or the phone. Wonderful. No. Okay. Then we will continue the public hearing to June 20th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and if we may now have a presentation of our 2021-2022 financial report by our finance director, Mark Brennan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mayor and the Commission. So this evening, we have Keith Simovic. He is a partner at Moss Adams, and he has been really patient and waited on Zoom for us. Let's see if he comes on shortly. There he is. All right, great. So the auditors were able to complete our audit. We met as an audit committee a week ago and reviewed the draft audit at that time. And the audit committee, we had some discussion on a couple of changes that we wanted to make to the draft. One was a correction to a date in a table on page 11, and then the other one was some verbiage changes to provide a little bit more clarity to note 12 on page 42 that had to do with our water sales contracts. And so those changes got completed this morning, and I was able to send out that draft to the commission. We don't anticipate any additional changes between that draft of the note this morning and the final audit when it's issued. We, as part of the audit, there were 4 adjustments that we made, and there were a couple of recommendations that the auditors have for us related to them. And so when Keith gives his presentation this evening, he'll go over the adjustments and the recommendations, and I can share what we're as staff doing to incorporate those recommendations, our effort on that. So with that, really glad that Keith's with us this evening and for his team's effort on our behalf for our audit. So if you want to take it away, Keith, that'd be great.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Mark. Hopefully all of you can hear me okay. I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen. So just 1 second. Okay, hopefully this is popping up for everyone. Thumbs up out there if you can see this. Perfect. You never know with these things. So perfect. Well, thanks again, Mark, for that intro, and thanks, commissioners, for your time this evening. As Mark mentioned, there is a kind of final draft before you, and yes, we do not expect any changes. We are at the finish line and pretty much ready to finalize the audit here shortly and put our signature on our audit reports and put this last fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2022 to rest. So with that, we get to talk through some of our audit results that came out of this process. Yes, some of the recommendations that Mark mentioned, and that really kind of came out of the adjustments that we identified, but lots of good news to note as well, right? Sometimes you think these audit reports and everything that we're just there to uncover the bad things, but there's a lot of good news to share. Definitely as well, and I do want to highlight a lot of those things too as we go through this. So glad to be here and glad that we could be on site again for the audit this year. I mentioned that to the audit committee, but I think that's important to note. It's great that we're able to have our team back there on site meet face to face. This is the second year that we've gotten to do that, which is fantastic. We really enjoy the team there at McMinnville Water and Light being gracious enough to host us and have us on site. So that was fantastic for our team members. Real quick, this isn't our full team. We actually have other members that were involved as well, some of our staff, but this is kind of the core of our team. Again, you know me, and you've heard my introduction from Mark. Olga Darlington is our concurring reviewer. That's our quality control reviewer, very experienced in the industry as well. She's involved in our power and utilities industry group, just like myself, and dedicates the majority of her time to working clients just in this space. So very experienced. She's a partner as well, and that's a quality control role that our firm requires on all the audits, right? That they have to review certain pieces of documentation, of course, the audited financial statements themselves, making sure that they include all the different bells and whistles that the governmental accounting standards require, but also making sure that we've done our risk assessment appropriately, that we followed our professional standards, and that we did all the things that we said we were going to do, that we had that follow through. So very important key person to have on the engagement. Happy to have her on the engagement this year. Laurel Pacheco, she's our senior manager, not quite as involved this year. She will be going forward, but she started helping out me in some of the overall engagement review that we do over all of our staff's work and everything. But she actually got to go off and help our firm as we're starting up a practice office over in India. So she was doing some training over there for a good chunk of the audit. And so she helped out just a little bit at the start, but you'll see more of her in the future. Then Sydney Jacoby, she's our in charge senior auditor, kind of out there leading our staff and everything during field work. And she's been on the audit for a few years now too. So we were happy to have her back. So that's the core of our team here. In terms of what can you expect to receive out of this process, just a quick reminder, boxes 1 and 2 are related. Those are really the main audit report that you're probably most familiar with. And it has to do with us getting to a point where we've done enough testing, right? All that substantive testing where we're looking back at contracts, agreements, invoices, and making sure things were recorded at the appropriate amount in the appropriate period. They follow all the accounting standards, that they have an appropriate business purpose. All of those different things are really, really important when you set forth your financial statements. So we're looking at all those things to get to a point at the end of the day, we can say, we think that financial report in front of you is free of material misstatement. And of course, any third party that's going to want to look at your financial statements, they want to see that you have an independent audit done and that you've got what's known as a clean or unmodified opinion. That basically says what I just said. So that's probably what you're most familiar with. That's going to be towards the front of the financial statements once everything is finalized. And box 2, really on top of all that testing we do, it's that technical review of that actual document itself. Is it in the format and the presentation that the governmental accounting standards requires? Does it have all the disclosures that are applicable based on the types of transactions that McMinnville Water and Light is entering into? So that's another very key piece of that. That's a process that I go through. It's a process that our quality control reviewer, Olga, goes through as well to make sure that you've got a good set of financial statements that are up to snuff with the generally accepted accounting principles. Box 3, you might not be quite as familiar if you haven't seen or gone through one of these presentations before, but for all Oregon municipal corporations, we also have to do additional testing procedures that the state of Oregon requires. So very unique to the state of Oregon that we have to do this, and additional reporting that we do as a result. There's certain requirements that the state says, auditor, if you are auditing an Oregon municipal corporation, you also have to test these things and report out if you found any instances of non-compliance. So there's a number of things there. Primarily the areas that we're looking at as they apply to McMinnville Water and Light have to do with public procurement. Where you deposit your funds. And of course, if you ever got into investments and things like that more in depth, those are the types of areas that we're looking at there and needing to report out. Do we see evidence that you're following those state guidelines? And then finally, box 4 is our communication to those charged with governance. It's a mouthful. I really want them to change that terminology at some point. They still haven't, but it's really our letter that we issue at the end of every audit that we do that gives you a little more insight into this process, right? Other than just that audit report that says, hey, you have a clean opinion, everything looks great in these financials, gives you a little more insight. Well, did we run into issues along the way? Were there adjustments that were identified? Are there recommendations? So we're going to talk through some of the highlights there too. So really the key thing right here, if you look at one slide in this whole thing, this is a lot of good news. This is what you want to see. in terms of a snapshot of where did we end this audit? What do the audit reports really say at the end of the day? And this is all key information that you really want to see each and every year out of this audit process. That audit report on the fairness and accuracy of the financial statements that I was just showing on the last slide, we are giving an unmodified clean opinion. Again, we feel that through the testing, we have enough evidence. We can say through our professional standards, those statements are free of material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud. So good information, exactly what you're looking for there. With the Oregon minimum standards report, that report on compliance and those additional procedures that we do surrounding procurement, deposits, other areas that we note in that report, we didn't have any compliance findings to note. So very good through some of the testing and the sampling that we did there. Like you're following all the state procurement guidelines and have the appropriate documentation in place to support that as well. To our communication to those charged with governance, a lot of things that we'll talk about in there, but the key thing that you always want to look for in that letter, were there any what we call material weaknesses? That's the kind of the highest level of severity in our audit speak of. We find anything where we feel there's a big gap in internal controls, checks and balances, where something could occur, something could slip through the cracks and not get caught by the system that you've got in place today. So those are the types of things that you want to be on the lookout for. We didn't have any through the evaluation we did of internal controls and processes and procedures this year. So again, very good news across the board overall for your audit results there. So moving forward, what's included in that communication to those charged with governance? Each one of these bullet points is kind of a different paragraph within that letter. I'm not going to go through each and every one of those. Some of those are pretty boilerplate language that our professional standards put out there. And whether we find anything or not that stands out, we'll put in. We have to put in that language. So I want to focus in on the areas that might be different or unique from previous years. And so number one there that we've got in bold, the significant accounting policies. There's a section that we have to talk about that says, hey, if you're looking at how things are accounted for, what the financial reporting looked like last year, you're comparing that to the current year. You want to know, well, are they doing, is the management team doing anything different? Or is that accounting department accounting for things differently than they did in the past at all? Because that would impact comparability from one year to the next. So the big key thing there that had an impact on your financial reporting this year is going to be a new accounting standards, GASB statement number 87. This one you may have heard of. We're talking about it with all of our clients and have been for a number of years, but it was finally implemented this year. It was effective for all local governments have to apply it this year, and it's related to how you account for lease transactions. So if you get into any leasing type transactions, whether you're a lessee, and you're leasing something from a third party, or you're a lessor, you're leasing one of your assets to a third party, this has guidance that will change how things were recorded previously. We went through that in depth with the audit committee. There was an impact there on your financial statements. You'll see basically an asset and kind of a liability on your financial statements related to certain key leases that were identified in that evaluation process this year with that newest standard and adopting of it. So there was a little bit of an impact there. It wasn't overly significant, but you will see an asset and a liability and new note disclosures related to that. Audit adjustments and our observations and recommendations. I'm going to move forward to the next few slides to go through those a little more in depth because they kind of tie to each other. Usually if we find an adjustment, we look and say, well, how did we find an adjustment? Or not how did we find it, but why did that error happen that we identified? And then that usually triggers some kind of recommendation. So those go hand in hand. We'll talk about that in a second. We always like to state though, too, when we have that bullet point in there, no difficulties in performing the audit. I think that's actually pretty key sitting there as part of a governing body, just to know, there weren't any scope exceptions in the audit. We got answers to all the questions we asked, and we received all the documentation that we requested, right? There wasn't anything where management was refusing to share something with us. They didn't put any walls in place or anything like that. We weren't able to complete the procedures that we needed to complete in order to give an audit opinion. So I think that's really important as well. All right, moving forward. So in terms of our adjustments and recommendations, so this one, things that we've kind of grouped together, there's some different adjustments here, both on the light side and the water side. but both somewhat similar. Mark may have some additional information to share in terms of each of these adjustments. But a lot of them had to do with just formula errors and other things within the calculations of these adjustments that resulted in some of these errors that were identified. One thing that we're suggesting to help prevent or detect these types of things going forward, when you think of formula errors and how complicated spreadsheets can get, sometimes it's really, really, really hard to catch a formula error in something. But one way that we at least started seeing that there's something might be off here is analytical review procedures, just simply looking at, what's changed from last year to this year and what doesn't look quite right, from a 30,000 foot view and diving in from there. So in this case, we're saying there are good controls in place. We know that the journal entry controls are in place, the reviews and approvals were in place, but some of these things are really hard to catch. And sometimes it's just taking that step back and looking to say, hey, does anything just overall not look right? And then you can dive in from there. So that's something that we're suggesting to address some of these items. And then going forward, we had one other item. This had to do with just the application of accounting guidance related to how you account for grants. As you get federal or state grants in and how you account for those, there is specific accounting guidance that talks about when you can actually show those as revenue, even if you've received the cash up front. If you haven't incurred eligible expenses related to that grant, right? If you got that grant funds to do a certain project or spend money on certain things, you can't actually show that as revenue, even if you got the cash up front until you've incurred those related expenses. So that actually, this adjustment moved that up to your balance sheet. So you have funds sitting as a liability until the point in time when you've spent those on eligible expenses, and then you can show that as revenue. So that is the other adjustment that was noted, and our recommendation has to do with reviewing the specific accounting guidance that talks about how you account for grants. So as you get into more grant funding in the future, I know this hasn't necessarily been something that's been overly significant, maybe in recent years, but as you get more and more, and if that becomes more common, being familiar with this standard will be really important to make sure that how that's accounted for is appropriate and aligned with those standards. I'm going to pause there just in case. Mark, do you want to add anything else while we're right on this topic of the recommendations and adjustments?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So I'll just share on the grant revenue. That was one that we just weren't familiar with. We typically don't have a lot of grants that we receipt, and so once we reviewed the GASB 33 information, it was clear what we needed to do. So that's that one we addressed just through the study of the GASB and familiarity in the future going forward. The other items, the other three, all related to each other, as Keith mentioned, described as spreadsheet formula issues. Really, what it is the spreadsheets provided the correct numbers for us to make the adjustments that we wanted to make, but the way that they were laid out, the numbers were reversed. So if we wanted to post a debit adjustment, well, debits are positive numbers, and it just so happened that the positive number represented on the spreadsheet needed to be a credit in our adjustment. And so in all three cases, we reversed our adjustment. And the analytic procedures that Keith mentioned. So our work papers had the adjustment, and we actually have takes two people to do an adjustment. So one person prepares the adjustment, and then there's a reviewer that reviews the adjustment and posts it. And we do that because that provides additional, that review helps to ensure that we, catch errors. And so ironically, in all three cases, the prepper and the reviewer both made the same mistake, because intuitively it just looked correct from looking at the work papers and looking at the adjustment, but yet they were wrong. They were reversed. And so the fix would be if we also had, as a part of that review, the expected result of the adjustment, the ending balance that we were anticipating. And then once it's posted, you could look and see, did it result in that balance? And in this case, in all three cases, we would have seen it didn't. And then we go and figure out what happened. So we're actually looking at doing something, for each adjustment we make, if we can do something that's done in a way that procedurally isn't, a lot of overhead. Certainly at year end, we do analytics, but we focus that more on the income statement than we have in the past on the balance sheet. So we really need to do the whole thing. In prior work that I've done, I've used a working trial balance, which is basically a way where you can kind of post adjustments in a spreadsheet, see the results of the adjustment before they're actually done in the accounting software. We haven't done that here because in my prior job, we could do basically all of our adjustments in a spreadsheet in a very formal way. And then you could create an upload file and just bring that right into your software and it would just automatically post all of it. And our current software doesn't allow that. So we've sort of been duplicating our work. So we're trying to come up with a way, we haven't got there yet, but to effectively do the same thing without having to duplicate, the adjustments in both places. So we're basically, it's in process on that, but clearly it wasn't a one-off. We had 3 of these that just happened to happen. So it's something we will do. It's good comments from the auditors, and we appreciate their help.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. And I would say, you want to, things like this are normal to come out of the audit process. Doesn't mean that there's significant issues or anything like that, right? This isn't anything that we're classifying as a material weakness or a significant deficiency in internal controls. It's a process of constant improvement. And these are a few things that came out of the process this year. And again, with the grant one, you might not be as familiar, you haven't gotten into that type of transaction too much in the past, right? So it's something to now be more familiar with, right? So these things are very normal to come out of the process, and it doesn't give us any overall concerns or anything like that. As we do know, there is a good system of internal controls in place overall. Okay, well, I know I mentioned up front, but thanks again to the whole team there at McMinnville Water and Light, and to the audit committee. I know their names aren't on here as well, but they are always very in tune with this process. And I will say that's a really good best practice that sets you apart from other utilities of your size. I don't think I have too many clients that I work with, at least in my experience, that are a similar size and have an audit committee with invested individuals from the board as well. And we've always experienced that with McMinnville Water and Light. So we really appreciate that and the time that everyone puts into this process to make sure that it's beneficial on your end, and you get some good results out of this. So thank you again. There's a lot of documentation that we're asking for, hundreds, if not thousands of pieces of things that we ask for each year on top of all the questions. So really appreciate all the efforts that the team puts into us. So thank you again. Other than that, I don't think I had anything else. So unless there's any questions, happy to entertain those.
Thank you. Commissioner Christensen, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't at this time. I actually am on the audit review committee, so I had an opportunity to participate in the earlier meetings.
Thank you. Commissioner Tate?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate all of the work that Tom and Jody put in, and thank you for doing that. And and thank you for a thorough explanation of everything. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. Chair?
Thank you, Keith. I've always enjoyed working with your firm. We get our questions answered, even though sometimes I ask the same question multiple years, but I just don't remember the answer. So thank you very much. It's very helpful, and I've learned a lot being on the audit committee. Really appreciate it.
Okay. I have one question related to the unbilled revenue and the adjustments. Are there any other reverberations outside of the what we might see in the year-end budget numbers? Does it push on any other lever anywhere else?
That particular adjustment for unbilled revenue, or for
any of the 3 adjustments, since they were larger numbers? Do they have a?
So I would would say I don't believe so. The unbilled revenue, that one we record revenue, so that we don't budget that revenue, but it gets recorded. So it wouldn't be like a budgeted, when I think of like budget criteria or budget limitations that you're watching, typically it's on the expense side. It wouldn't affect that. There was the two for the BPA ones. One was a conservation receivable, and the other one was a load shaping true up. And the true up particularly was interesting in that it was actually a $65,000 receivable that we were trying to record, and we recorded instead and it's a net receivable. So we allocate that across the distribution customers, and the two industrial customers. And so when we recorded that and those allocations in reverse, in order to adjust them to the appropriate amounts, you have to double everything. And so the total adjustment looks pretty large, but actually the net is 65,000 is the change. So and again, these are all balance sheet entries. So I don't see a budget impact, if I understand your question. So
Good question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you to the members of our audit committee, and thank you.
I would just share too that we very much appreciate working with Moss Adams. There's a lot of like back and forth that occurs, particularly, they come and they'll do all of their testing, and working with us and staff, and there's a lot of work that staff puts in, and yet when they leave, there's a lot of back and forth, particularly as the report's being drafted, and there's a lot of coordination with that, and we're grateful for the effort that they put in on that on our behalf, and just appreciate their follow through, and we keep pretty tight calendar, and they're very communicative on that as well. So anyway, grateful for them and for all the staff that put the time in to do this, both in accounting, a lot of people, a lot of hours in, and also throughout the organization. So anyway, grateful for all the effort put in and results.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to everyone.
As a formality, the commission there's typically a motion to accept the financial audit for Moss Adams for the fiscal year. That's
I would entertain a motion to accept the financial audit as presented by Moss Adams.
So moved.
I'll second.
Wonderful. I have a motion by Commissioner Tate and a second by Commissioner Christensen. Will all those in favor please signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye now.
And we will now move on to a GLM agreement, and will you be presenting that?
Yes, I'm going to present that. I think James is maybe resting. Anyway, so this relates to a recent timber sale in the watershed, the Waterlines Powerline East timber sale that Mr. Keller was speaking about earlier this evening. In completing that sale, the timber harvester made use of a BLM road that was north of the harvest unit. I think they transited part of some Weyerhaeuser ground and then transited some BLM ground. And that was actually prior to having this agreement in place. I spoke with Mr. Keller about it. He was kind of expecting to get some kind of negative feedback from BLM on that. But apparently they put the road back in such good condition that instead BLM presented us with an amendment number 5 to the right-of-way agreement, granting waterlight rights on that road. So they're not seeking anything in return for that. I think it's basically administrative action. It does give waterlight rights on the road. into the future. I think Mr. Keller said it'd probably be another 70 or 80 years before Waterline uses the road again, but maybe we'll need it then. So in the materials, there is a resolution. It'll be 2022-21. Approving the form of amendment number 5 and authorizing the mayor and the clerk to sign. And I can answer if there's any other questions, I can try to answer.
So I'm very pleased that the relationship has gotten back on a more even keel, and I hope we can keep it that way. So I move adoption of the resolution.
Okay, so this would be resolution number 2022-21, a resolution by the City of McMinnville Municipal Corporation, State of Oregon, acting by and through its Water and Light Commission, authorizing approving amendment number 5 to the right-of-way and road use agreement and ONC logging road right-of-way permit between Water and Light and the United States of America Bureau of Land Management. That's 2022-21.
Okay, so I have a motion from Chair Tankersley to accept resolution number 2022-21, excuse me. Have a second?
I'll second.
Need a second?
I think we.
Or do we just vote?
I think we actually have to public commission on the resolution. I think
Oh, sorry.
No, she has to second it first. though,
Oh,
right?
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a motion from Chair Tankersley, a second from Commissioner Christensen. And Trina, will you please poll the commission?
Yes, Mayor Drapkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Tate.
Yes. And the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Super. Good.
And now we are again going to step off the agenda as printed. We will come back to the draft update to customer policies. But right now we are going to go into executive session. I'd ask that our legal counsel read us into executive session.
Okay, we're going to into executive session pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub F to consider information and records that are exempt by law for public inspection under ORS 192-355 sub 9 sub A relating to confidential or privileged records and ORS 40.225 attorney-client communications. If there are any press with us, they're cautioned not to share materials that are shared in executive session. We will be returning to open session after the session for any actual decisions, and we'll probably be returning, I'll estimate, in 20 minutes.
Thank you.
I think Mr.